This is the Heroes Podcast. I'm back again with Susan Lataille. How are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fantastic. I've been looking forward to this interview. You know, Susan, you're a special person for me. And before I go into before we go into the interview, I will intro you so people know who we are meeting today. And I have met Susan quite a few times. But Susan is the founder of Shining a Light on Grief and is a certified master grief coach dedicated to helping others navigate loss with grace. Inspired by her son's Nathan's passing in 2017, Susan combines her diverse background, including military service and founding DiscoverYou Events with holistic certifications to offer compassionate support. She's committed to honoring Nathan's memory by empowering those in grief through her work. Welcome on the show. Susan,
Thank you.
you want to take us back to the beginning of the hardest part of your journey, if you want to? How did you feel? What was going on for you?
Well, I think, you said it in my introduction that, the loss of my son with his diagnosis in November of 2014, through his passing in 2017 I thought was difficult. And then came the grief that followed that. There was some anticipatory grief prior to it, just knowing that his time was limited here. And then going into full-blown grief of my only child. So that was really definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to process or learn to cope with, or whatever word you want to use, continue to live life when, you feel so broken.
How did you feel on some of the days that have been the hardest? I know some of my audience is growing through something similar.
Mm.
What was it like?
Yeah, it's hard. It's definitely, you feel shattered, you feel broken. I started questioning life. I started questioning my purpose. I, started questioning what it's all about and why we're here. It just wondering how I was going to continue to live each day. And I did go through the motions. I didn't like just stop and like stay in bed all day, although it was extremely hard to make it through like an entire day. And unfortunately, one of my coping mechanisms was I wanted to be numb. So I started drinking a lot. By 5 o'clock in the evening, it was like, okay, I just want to be numb. I don't want to feel this anymore. I don't want to think about it. And it was definitely self-sabotage. And luckily that ended, that it didn't continue forever.
And obviously then that had other impacts, I
Yeah.
would say, on your health. Maybe obviously you had a relationship. Uh, how has that impacted uh, other areas of life?
Well, health, definitely. I was not feeling my best. I was extremely tired. I was having a lot of headaches. I wasn't sleeping well. And of course, then it impacted my relationship with my husband too, as he's watching me and not being able to help. So that was a devastating time for him too, even though it wasn't his son. It was more of watching me just not be able to help myself or him help me. He didn't know how to help me. And I didn't know how he could help me. Part of me just isolated.
Would you say, I was just thinking, would you say changing your perspective on life and death, or what has been the biggest factor for you to come through this sane?
The biggest thing was really community. And it's something I really resisted in the beginning of wanting to be alone at first, and then realizing when I spoke to people who had similar experiences, it made me feel so much better. It made me feel like I could talk about him and not be judged, and not feel like I'm talking about him too much or sharing too much about him. It was really that part. And then, there were other things too, between starting to writing my story, which really, really helped me be able to get some of those thoughts and feelings out. And even those that I didn't write, it was still helpful that I was going through those emotions as I wrote his story. So there was a lot. I mean, there was certainly a lot during, COVID. That really gave me the opportunity to have to face my grief, because I couldn't work at the time and I was going like full force, and that just helped me stop and really, really look at what I was doing and my grief, and then being able to get out in nature and walk and start taking, better care of myself. So I needed that time to truly grieve. I find that, in society, we're so thrown back into our quote normal routines when nothing is normal. We're not the same people. We're not going to be able to produce the same kind of work. We're not going to be able to focus in the same way. And when COVID hit and everything shut down here in the United States, for me, it was actually a blessing, because I was able to really stop and look at where I was and what I was doing and what was going to be next for me.
Would you say it's quite a common experience that people do not take the time, they do not stop long enough to process losing a loved one, that that just becomes, I'm done with it and I moved on, yet there is so much pain and loss suppressed that at one point later there is a collapse coming?
And a lot of people, yes, we're just not given that time. We're given like 2 or 3 days to grieve a loved one. And how can you possibly, that's more or less for you to go through whatever your rituals are of, ceremony and burial and all of that, then you're expected to be back at work. And you're expected to perform at the same level. And, there's that part, but there's also the part where people don't want to talk about it because they don't know how to talk about it. They were told that, you don't cry, or you don't express your inner feelings to people. You don't, it's like, oh, you're supposed to handle this alone, when that is exactly the opposite of what most people need. And that's what we've really, really, and the more I learn and the more I'm out there working in this demographic, is the community. That's where the true healing takes place. That's where we're able to identify with somebody else's grief, because grief levels the playing field. It doesn't matter who you are, what your age is, what your race is, none of it. It matters when it comes to grief, where everything else in society looks at you by how much money you have, what kind of job you have, what kind of car you drive. When it comes to grief, none of that matters.
what would you say? What would be an ideal time to that we should, as a society, give to people? I understand that it varies,
Right.
but what would be, let's say, ideal that would allow people to really stop, seek professional help,
Mm-hmm.
and allow themselves to really move on and with their lives?
I would say 6 months to a year. I read recently in some cultures, when somebody loses, a significant loved one that's very close to them, that the whole community takes on all their responsibilities and all they're meant to do is grieve. That's it. And everyone's there to support them in that. Nothing is expected of them. How beautiful would that be if we could actually do that?
Is it in a tribal society that this?
I think that's what they were referring to. I don't remember exactly where that came from. I read things and hear things all in a lot of different places.
I believe there is a different time frame for each.
Mm.
Also, I believe in professional help or
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
community they can lean on.
Yeah.
I didn't want to bring in the other side, the start of life, but when I moved to Australia, and I would love to have your thoughts on this. And I think it's similar in the US. When sort of the baby is born, so
Mhm.
when we're starting life, then I've seen moms, and I've lived in New Zealand, Australia, these two countries for sure. I've seen them basically deliver the baby, and in 6 weeks' time, they've been back at work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming from Central Europe. I was born in Hungary, and I was asking myself, like, how have they come up with that 6 week holiday, or whether it was sort of 3 months? Where I come from, it's like it's up to 3 years
Wow.
by the
Uh,
state.
mm-hmm.
And you have a choice of 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, and then you have sort of a decreased amount of salary that you get from
Right.
the earlier amount. But what is your take on that?
I think you're very right. I mean, I think it's both ends of the spectrum from, at birth and at death, that we're not allowed to be human. We're not allowed to be with our children when they're born for a significant amount of time, nor are we allowed to grieve when a loved one passes. We're meant to just continue on as society thinks, because we're go, go, go all the time, that it's not about the quality of life. It's, they're more thinking about, oh, how can you work in our society? How can you make money? How can you do all of this? Where I think it's very, misunderstood on how we should live as humans. Like, people forget, I think, that they're human and they have needs. It's not just work, 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 work. It's got to be, the rest of life in there too. It's got to be, raising your children and spending time with them. It's got to be grieving when that's appropriate. And there's other griefs along the way too. Grief is not just of a loved one. We lose so many other things in the course of our lives. And some of it, I think, helps prepare us for the big ones. Although if we don't learn how to process at that time, then how are we going to process when somebody actually dies if we can't process little things? So I think it's more of a conversation. I'd love to see grief talked about so much more. And that's one of the things that I am certainly doing is let's get this out in the open. Let's talk about it. Let's let people know that they're normal in the way that they're thinking, that it's okay not to be okay. Like everybody just wants to walk around and everybody's supposed to be happy, but that's not the reality. We all have, life that happens to us, regardless of what that is. And we're just meant to put on, a happy face. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Yeah,
So,
I had a video last week about the I am fine people,
right, right,
is
right. Yeah, yeah.
which
We
is
feel that nobody wants to hear it. People ask, but it's more out of like a greeting than really wanting to know how that person is.
what I found out about those people usually is I don't want to talk about it. I switched off feeling a long time ago, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to ever go back again because it was too painful.
Right, right. Yeah.
So, what has brought you to sort of the next stage? This is how you have become a helper or assisting people through grief, or what was the
Yeah, so because of this and because of the way, I perceived grief to be out in the world and because I was still out there and like nobody ever said anything. Like nobody talked to me about it. Nobody even mentioned or very few did. The only ones that did were the ones that could understand where I was, the ones that have had significant losses. So with that, I decided to become a certified master grief coach in 2021. And with that, I started helping people share their stories of love and loss, of, when we dare to love greatly, we're also going to grieve greatly. That's part of life. And it's not something to be, swept under the carpet. It's something to really look at and talk about so that families can, support each other. Because if you have a family of four, they're all going to grieve in a different way. No one's going to be the same. So in helping these people share their stories of their loved ones, not only help them sharing it because it's definitely cathartic and healing, it also helped the reader because it provided hope and inspiration to them that, hey, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that was thinking this. Oh my God, me too. And then at the same time, it also helps me. It helps me to continue being in this community of people that are willing to share their stories. And it helps me continue to process mine. So it's not like it's ever being put on the back shelf. It's not being pushed down. It's right there, always in my face because of the work that I do. So it's great for me to be able to help those people. And within each story, each group of people, it turns into a compiled book. So this group of people, I look at each book as a little family because there's such community there, such love and respect by the time we finish these projects that you have lifetime friends. There's no way that you can't, you know, be able to stay connected because you've shared on such a deep level. You've shared something with people that you a lot of times never shared with anyone. So it's very humbling, and I'm proud of each and every book and each and every person. It's like my children in a way, like the way I've created this, that I'm, the mama bear looking out for my cubs and making sure they get through this process because I know it's going to help them.
I was wondering if it was me, would I be re-triggered by the stories? How are you able to have that external view or separate from the pain? That
You don't,
makes sense.
you don't. You don't separate the pain. In writing the story, in sharing your story, in reading some of your words, it's all helping that healing process take place. If you're triggered, it just means that there's more healing to be done. It's not to be judged or pushed down or forgotten about.
Uh,
It's meant to, it's meant to help. And and that's where part of it is cathartic.
What a powerful insight. Well done. I really love that you can go in deeply and help you and them to heal through the experience. What would you say to someone who is stuck in grief now? What would be maybe 3, 5 things they could start doing right now? Actionable steps.
Actionable steps, if you journal or write, do anything, get your thoughts down, get it out of your head, get it out of your heart, just write and don't worry about, about it being censored, that anyone's going to read it. 2, do things that you love. If you love being in nature, go out in nature. Nature is so healing and teaches us so much. Community, find a community that you can resonate with, that have similar experiences, whether that's a grief group or an organization that has had similar journeys. Stay connected to them. That's important. I mean, find a therapist or coach or counselor if you feel you need to talk one-on-one with someone. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it helps so many people. And lastly, just be gentle with yourself. Give yourself grace. Allow yourself and your process to go however it needs to go without judgment. Not wanting to feel like, oh, I should be much further at this point or this or that. Just let it be whatever it needs to be.
I'm wondering, how you obviously had an experience of that. What would you suggest to people, family members who are living with someone who is grieving? Like, what could they do? Like, probably you had gathered a lot of experience since then. What would have been the best way for your husband to treat you or deal with you back 6, 7 years ago?
Yeah, I think not only, asking how I am, because obviously I'm not okay. Asking how you can help. Like, I feel people that are grieving need to train or let other people know what they need. It's like, okay, what do you need? If you want to talk, I'm here. If you want to cry, I'm here. If you need a hug and you need to be held, I'm here. And just do those compassionate things that you can really help, that can really help those people that are grieving, or that could help me. Is, again, everybody is so different. Like, how can I help you? What can I do? Because people feel so helpless. They don't know how to help. They don't know what to do because they've never had to experience anything like that before. And there's just being there, you know, even, hey, can I take you out? Can I take you, out to dinner? Can I take you to a movie? What can we do that will maybe just help you feel a little bit calmer or help you feel supported? So many times we don't feel supported. We feel very alone in our grief.
Thanks for sharing that. What drives you now? What would you be celebrating in 5 years' time, Susan?
Oh, well, just next year. Right now I have 6 books. Next year, my goal is to have 10. So in 5 years, well, I would say 30 books. My joy really comes with helping these individuals and seeing a finished product that they wrote, that they've been part of, that you can never take that away. And for them to know that their loved one's memory lives on through their words.
How to engage with you? If someone is after more information, they want to get in touch with you, is there a website, social media? Help us.
If there's the website is Shining a Light on Grief. There's a Facebook page called the same, or you can also find me by my name, Susan Lataille, on both Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. You can find me at Grief Coach Susan, or you can always reach out to me directly at susan@susanlataille.com.
What have I not asked that you want to share today, Susan?
I just wish that I could show people hope, that feel like they're so lost and they don't have an avenue for help. That there's so many people that stay isolated and really don't know how to cope with life at all after the loss of a loved one. My sincere wish for them is that they're able to reach out to somebody that can help. And whether that's, like I said, a therapist or a coach or somebody, sometimes maybe even a friend, anything that can help, or an organization that supports whatever it is that, how their loved one died. There's so many resources out there that, all you have to do is search for them. And there's plenty. And books, don't forget books. Books are always a great way to, if you don't want to be around other people, maybe you can read. So that's where I started, because I didn't want to talk to anybody in the beginning. I was just reading books about other people's experiences to make me feel like I wasn't alone.
Thank you very much for sharing your message, sharing your story, and I wish you that 30 books or even 60 to help others to process these difficult situations in life when they lose someone. And I hope to see you soon again.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.